Good morning. My name is Lucy Gray, and I'm the conference co-chair of the Global Education Conference, and I'd like to introduce you to one of our leadership team members who's been a long-term supporter of this event, Julene Reed. She is an accomplished educator, has 5 million labels after her signature, and most notably, she is an Apple Distinguished Educator, as am I, as are several people in the room right now. And she has had an amazing journey doing some work with Polar Bears International, and she's going to talk about that today. On a personal note, I've known Julene now for, I don't know, since 2005, and we've had many adventures together, and most notably in 2010, we traveled together to Bahrain to the Education Project Conference. And since then, we've always wanted to do that again, and we just have had a great time together. She's very knowledgeable, very supportive, very interested in STEM, and I think you're going to find that she wears a lot of different hats that you may find some information about all of the things that she does to be of use to you. So, Julene, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for your long-time service to this conference. We deeply appreciate it. And without further ado, I'm going to proceed through the kind of information that everybody needs to know right now. If you are having difficulty with audio, then you're not going to hear this, but you'll see the slide here where you can go to the Tools menu and you can configure your audio through the Audio Setup Wizard. If you want to configure your profile so that other people can see your information, please do that under Edit, Preferences, and Profile. You can hover over other people's profiles and see where they're from and that sort of thing if they've done the same. And if you want to see the chat in a little bit larger format, you can detach it. There's a drop-down menu that looks like 6 little lines with an arrow. You can detach any of these panels actually if you want a bigger view. More information here. Let me go through this. And it's not moving for me, of course. There we go. We did start recording. That's a good thing. And there's some other reminders that I want to make sure that you are aware of. We have a help area on the front page of our website this year. So make sure if you have any questions or anything, you can jump in there and we'll be happy to help you. We also have a conference lounge. If you are in Blackboard Collaborate, you can always go into that lounge and we can answer questions there as well. We'd love for you to follow us on Twitter. Our ID is GlobalEdCon, and the back channel hashtag for this conference is GlobalEd13. An evaluation survey will pop up when we're done with this session. We would love to have your feedback about this particular session and about the conference in general. So please take time to fill that out for us. And we're looking for more outreach partners to help us get out the word about next year's conference. So if you belong to a school or a nonprofit who would like to be an outreach partner, we'll put your information on our website and cross-promote you as well. And then finally, we really want our conference to keep alive during the rest of the year. We have a lot going on in our discussion forum right now where people are sharing projects, and we actually have 5 projects that we're trying to establish at this conference. We talked about them in the opening keynote, and hopefully we'll talk about them more at our closing keynote tomorrow. But you're welcome to join those project groups and get involved with other community members. So take a look at our discussion forum when you have a chance. We'd like to thank our sponsors who've been really instrumental in helping us run this event: IRON, Global Campaign for Education, EduChange, VIF, Adobe Science for Us, EdWeb, EdSurge, and Blackboard Collaborate. Thank you, sponsors. So this is the fun part of my duties here in introducing Julene. Everybody's going to get the whiteboard privileges. And I'd like you to take the tool to the left of the whiteboard that looks like a star and click on it and show us where you are this morning or wherever it is. We have looks like a lot of East Coast, Midwest people right now. Somebody down south. That must be Larry. Larry, are you in here? I hope it's Larry. So we've got people from all over. We've got somebody in India, got some Canadians. Let's fill up that map. Do we have anybody up in Churchill, Manitoba, Julene?
No, I'm not there. I don't see anybody there.
Okay. So this is what we do at the beginning of every session, and it's a fun way to kind of bring everybody together. In the text chat, please tell us where you're from, what time it is, and maybe where you are in your part of the world, and also maybe what the weather's like. I'm in Northbrook, Illinois right now, just outside Chicago. It's about 40 or 50 degrees out and overcast. So please feel free to use the chat to ask questions, share resources as we get going today. And without further ado, I am going to turn this over to my friend Julene and have her tell you about her exciting stuff. Thank you, Julene, and take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad some of those Canadians are here where the polar bears are in their backyard. So I'm glad they're here. I see lots of familiar names here, which is really fun. So this is Polar Bears, Global Connections, and Citizen Science. It's kind of a mishmash or a mashup of a lot of different topics into one. But that's kind of the focus we've been doing lately, is looking not just on polar bears, which we will talk about, and climate change, but then how does that connect around the world. And then one of my newest favorite things, although it's always been a favorite, but just something I'm really excited about, is citizen science and how your students and you can get involved in being scientists yourself. So we'll kind of go through some of this and talk about a lot of different things. Thanks to Steve and Lucy for all their hard work for this conference. As always, it's amazing, and I want to be in a million places at once and try to do my day job at the same time. And that's kind of hard, but thanks, guys, for all your hard work, and hello to all my friends out there. And I see somebody actually from Tennessee, GPS, so hi to you guys, or girls. I know it's girls over there. So polar bears, my work with polar bears came about through working with Dr. Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots, and with Dr. Jane, who greatly influenced my life and the work that I get to do and I'm so fortunate to do. And through that, I became a Roots and Shoots leader, and that's Jane's educational outreach, care and concern for animals, people, and the environment. And then I started working with Polar Bears International. So it's been a great journey going through all those different things, and Polar Bears International has given me lots of opportunities, including lots of trips up to Churchill, Manitoba, which we'll look at on the map in just a second, which is known as the polar bear capital of the world. And so Polar Bears International has a great initiative going on right now for education. It's called My Planet, My Part. And in that, you can watch live cams that are explore.org, part of the Annenberg Foundation. So we have live cameras. Right now, you're going to see mostly archived. There is some live camera feed, I think, still going on from probably out on the Cape. But if not, the archive loops are there too. There are certain hours. So I think I actually think the lives are still going on in different places, but you can look and check that out as well. But My Planet, My Part gives some great ways for educators and students and adults, or anyone really, any community, to take action and get involved in studying polar bears and making a change in the world. And this is the little cub we saw last week. This was so funny. It was a live camera right outside one of the broadcasts we were doing, and this cub was there with his mother. And this cub would take that willow branch and throw it in the air and then bury its head in the snow and roll around and turn somersaults, and it was really fun to watch. It was like, could not have been scripted better, because at the end of the broadcast, the cub crawled up on its mother's head and on its mother's back and laid its head down and went to sleep for the evening, or for the afternoon. So it was really fun to watch that last week on one of the broadcasts. And then there's also Dr. Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots. That's a great resource for doing types of environmental work and other projects as well. So I highly recommend both of those resources to you to work with you and your students, and those are organizations with which I've been involved. So polar bears in the Arctic, that's what we're going to talk about. And where exactly is Churchill? When she asked if I saw anybody in Churchill, it was easy to tell, because Churchill is actually up here on the Hudson Bay. The only way you can get there is either by train, by boat, or by plane. There are no roads there, so it's a bit of a journey when I travel up there. And it's really a pretty small town, just a few hundred people. And its industries are tourism. They have the polar bears in the winter, and they have beluga whales in the summer. And then they have a lot of grain that they grow around there, so it's a big port. And it really is the Hudson Bay from your history classes of 6th grade long ago or something, when you studied the Hudson Bay Company. So there are lots of connections to the Hudson Bay Company there as well. So it's a great hub of transportation and bringing grain and different food and supplies in by big ships that are out in the harbor a lot. So that's Churchill, Manitoba. When I'm there, I get to travel around on a Tundra buggy, and this is what a Tundra buggy looks like at the top left. That's actually buggy 1, and that is our research buggy. So on the back, you'll see we have some wireless connectivity going on along with our camera that we're doing some of the explore.org live feeds for using that camera. And then you can see I did a little pano with the inside of the buggy that I put down below here. So that's BJ Kirchhofer. He's my tech guru of the Tundra, I always call him. And BJ runs what used to be really basic as far as our broadcasts that we do. We actually conduct video conferencing and webcasts from out on the shores of the Hudson Bay on the Tundra, which is pretty amazing, and some of the conditions we're often in with blizzards and everything. But we're able to do that through a microwave feed back to this lodge. It's a bunch of Tundra buggies lined up kind of like a train, and then we have the microwave going into Churchill and fiber into Winnipeg. So that's for your tech gurus out there. How do we do that? And you might recognize something on the front of that Tundra buggy. If you think you know what it is, on the front of the picture of the Tundra buggy that's strapped up there with all kinds of straps, type in the chat. Let's see if anybody can guess what it is, and I'll tell you in a second. So we have like a production studio, and BJ has grown this program so well with all of us that we are able to actually have mixers with live camera feeds outside, and we're able to broadcast from inside with experts and scientists. And then we can show videos and show slides, and then we have these little desks where we're walking around, and then what's behind them is the steering wheel where the driver sits in the steering wheel and the wipers through the window, and we pull those films down to keep the backlight out. And we're able to broadcast to thousands of students and teachers around the world live from the Tundra every fall for about 4 weeks, and that's just really amazing. In the back of this buggy is a fireplace, kind of a gas fireplace, a gas heater, so we're warm, don't worry. And there's a couple bunk beds where I've spent many nights out there, but they're also the big Tundra buggy lodge we stay on sometimes as well. So it's kind of our home away from home, and nobody's guessed what that was. Let me go back and look at it one more time so you can see it actually. That's actually a Street View camera. That's kind of a preview of something that's coming up by Google in about a month's time. We're kind of under a press embargo right now, but there's some really exciting fun things going to be happening. So we've been working a lot with Google as well out there, and a lot of other partners that you'll see right here. We've had, Michael is there. I'm the director of that program, and Michael was there about 2 weeks after I was there. So, and he was leading some of the broadcasts out there too, Michael, with Taking It Global. We've been doing a lot of work together through the HB Catalyst Academy, and then we brought him, because of that work together, we brought him into the Tundra to be one of our speakers last week. So here's some of the organizations we work with. Although there's more, and I'm sure I'll probably get in trouble for leaving somebody out, but I just hit some of them, and it's Google and Apple Education, Discovery Education, Edmodo, Roots and Shoots, Explore.org, Taking It Global, Frontiers North Adventure is where we get our buggy. There are one of our sponsors, as is Canada Goose. And so this is kind of what our panel looks like. We sit at this table that looks really nice, and you never dream how quickly we throw it together. And that's where we do our broadcasts. And then on the right side, you'll see a shot from one of the schools here where they were actually watching with the live broadcast, and you can kind of see the video conference window down the corner of that. So we're able to connect with lots of people, and it's just amazing to see the program the way it has grown. It's really made a huge impact, and we try to make the content fresh all the time, so it's not the same thing. So polar bears live in the circumpolar north. Churchill is really the subarctic, and we live up near the North Pole, but not as far north as the true Arctic. But they live in Alaska, Canada, Russia, Greenland, and Norway. And about 2/3 of the world's polar bears are thought to actually live in Canada. So if you were to look at the Earth from the top, this is kind of where they live. If you were looking at the globe from the top, and there are 19 subpopulations, and they're not necessarily evenly distributed because they kind of go where the food is. And where the food is where the sea ice is most productive for hunting seals, because that is their primary source of food, is the seals. So they're perfectly adapted to life in the Arctic. Their fur, the way their feet work, everything, and they're able to survive in a very harsh environment where temperatures can get below 60. I'm glad I'm not there that time of year when they get below 60, but they can get really low. And they are most at home out on the sea ice. So when I'm there, they're kind of walking up and down the shore and waiting for the ice to start to freeze. And it's amazing, this huge body of water that freezes, and they go out and they can punch holes in the ice. They'll sit and lie in wait for the seals to come up and get a breath. And they can tell they're underneath, or they can tell it's one of the seals' homes underneath, and they'll punch holes in the ice and grab the seals. So they're really dependent on that sea ice for their food. They can eat other things like kelp, and they'll sometimes feast on a whale carcass or a walrus or something like that, but that's really not going to sustain them because they need the fat. In fact, one of the scientists calls them, what he calls them is lipivores. It's like a carnivore, omnivore, herbivore, but lipivore who lives on fat, and that's Dr. Andy DeRocha. He kind of coined that term because they need that fat to be able to survive. And they use that ice to hunt the seals, to find mates. They're always walking around looking for their mates, and for breeding. You know, it's important for their breeding and finding the mates. The snow and the ice are important for the maternal dens and their denning, and then they use it to care for their young and walking around and teaching them how to hunt and do things as well. So that ice is really an important part of their ecosystem. It's a part of their habitat, and these are the seals that they feed on, the ringed and bearded seals, which are also dependent on that sea ice. So it's that whole food web and how everything is connected from the plankton at the bottom of the web all the way up through the highest top level of that food web, which is a polar bear, because pretty much the only predator polar bears have is us, the human. So they're so perfectly adapted to this Arctic condition. Why is their future in jeopardy? And I'm sure most of you can guess why it's in jeopardy. It's because their habitat and their ecosystem are in jeopardy with the changes in the sea ice. And as it melts away, as the sea ice warms, and as the climate warms, the sea ice forms later in the fall and melts earlier in the spring, that shortens the number of days they're able to go out and hunt on the ice. And that's why it's such a threat to them, because they don't have enough time to get the nutrition they need to survive. So it's pretty much that sea ice habitat that's being affected by global warming and climate change that is the biggest threat to the bears. And it's causing the atmosphere to warm quickly now because of a buildup of greenhouse gases. And so we see a lot of changes every year. We've seen the scientists who've been out there for 25 and 30 years have seen a lot of change. And it's not a matter of weather. Weather and climate are two different things. I love the way one of the scientists explains to students is, what's the difference? Well, weather is when you look outside your window and it's raining. That's the weather. It's raining today. Where climate is a longitudinal study of what the ups and downs of what's happening in that weather and watching that, and I like that explanation of it. So the rising temperatures equals a decline in the extent of the sea ice, how much is formed, and the quality, how good it is, how thick it is. And so no sea ice basically, as we're moving to less and less ice, means that someday if we have no sea ice, we'll have no polar bears. So just looking at all of that, what are the impacts of climate change on the polar bears? And I'm sure you've seen some of them publicized on TV. One of the impacts that we've seen, actually, that's kind of an aside from this list, is that we've had more polar bears walking to Churchill this year. We've had more problem bears in the town of Churchill walking around, and Churchill has such an amazing polar bear alert program that you see the sign for here on the right that is really excellent for trying to protect the people but at the same time not harm the bears. So they have patrols and they shoot cracker shells to scare them away and try to keep them out, and sometimes they have to capture them and put them in a holding facility, and then they'll airlift them via helicopter. They'll mark them so they can tell which ones have been problematic, and if they return, they get helicoptered farther away than they were the first time, but they'll be taken back out and dropped somewhere. And if they become too problematic, it's sad, because if they hurt someone, if they injure someone, then it's not a good outcome for the polar bear. But what's happening with climate change is they have less time to be on the ice to feed, like we talked about. The bears we're seeing, their cubs, or the bears themselves, are often less healthy. Fewer cubs and less healthy cubs. We used to see quite a few triplets, and now we still see some twins. But not as many as we have in the past. There have been incidences of cannibalism, and we, like I said, have seen them moving into populated areas where normally they would not. And they're going there because they're hungry. We've seen some drowning. I think that has sometimes been a bit dramatized, but there have been bears who have drowned from swimming long distances, and they can swim a really long distance, 60 miles or something. But we've had them where they've even been noted to swim longer, and there has been drowning. But the range of the bears too, the distance they have to travel as they're walking to look for the sea ice to freeze, and they're walking to look for the seals to eat, has increased. And so they're having to go further out on the ice, and they're having to walk farther. And we know that by some of the technology we're able to use with them to monitor what they're doing. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So one of the things I was going to talk about today too is how do we use technology to monitor the animals, and I know that we had the leading snow owl expert with us on the Tundra, Denver Holt. And Denver Holt says they put actually little tracking devices on the back of snow owls that are kind of like little backpacks that they wear. And so with the sea ice, what we're doing, there's a lot of work being done by NOAA and NOAA and other organizations with satellite imagery and flying over the different terrains of where the sea ice is and measuring and taking images. So there are lots of technologies monitoring the sea ice. This is one actually that had buoys, and this was done by Ignatius Rigger at the University of Washington. And this is a video that I'm not going to show. I'm just going to show some screenshots from it because it's kind of hard to show a video over a webcast, and I don't want you to be delayed, so we're just going to do the screenshots. But it shows the changes from 1978 to 2008, and when you watch that video, which is up on Polar Bear International's site or on YouTube for Polar Bears International, it's pretty amazing because what you see is it starts at this huge mass of sea ice here in 1982. 2001, we're down to this level, and by 2008, at the end of the video, you can see the sea ice is pretty much gone. There's very little there. So it's a pretty impactful video. Lots of times just showing that makes people see, yeah, we really do have a problem, and it's something that's really affecting our sea ice. So along with that, to be able to do tracking of polar bears, they put these satellite collars on them, and that's Dr. Stephen Amstrup in the back. They're putting getting ready to put a collar on a sedated bear. And then they can watch the movement and the observations. They can watch what the polar bears are doing and how far they're traveling. So this little map on the right shows you that. We can't put them on the males because just the shape and contour of their body and their shoulders and necks, they fall off. So we have some ear tagging and some devices like that, but this is what they put on several of the females and track them. And then they can gather information that makes it easier to kind of manage them and see what they're doing. Although still field observation is very important as well, and that's one of the things we talked about on the Tundra, that all this technology is great, but it still comes down to we need a lot of field observation as well by scientists. So this is called the Bear Tracker, and this is a great education unit that's on Polar Bear International's website, where you can actually see how they've tracked some of these bears, and there are lesson plans for teachers. There's actually real data here that you can use, as well as a PowerPoint that you can use, and you can see how these bears have been moving around the Hudson Bay and changes in behavior and how far they're traveling, and it's all related back to what's happening with the sea ice. So you can certainly look at that. One of the things we've been really lucky to do, and this is how we became involved, I actually I saw Michael with Taking It Global a few years ago at ISTE when he did a keynote presentation on the orangutans in Borneo and deforestation there. But there are some other people I knew through here, but one of the things we've been doing with ISTE and the New Media Consortium and HP is something called the HP Catalyst Academy. And so we're doing these different, we've created all these different mini courses with different organizations. They've created online mini courses that are professional development for educators, all focusing on STEM Plus or STEAM, all free, and amazing topics from maker labs and gaming and education and climate change and creating an e-book, just a lot of different topics, and there's one on citizen scientists right there with mobile devices. So I recommend you go and look through some of the programs here. There are some awesome resources. You can take one of the mini courses at any time. Or you can also just go in and view the resources and see. I know everything we've put on our 2 courses, we have 2 up there now with Polar Bears International. It's geared for education. There are lots of photos and PowerPoints and all kinds of files we've provided that are for educators and students to use at no charge. So these have been just amazing resources. And Thinking Global has 2, one on cultural awareness, if you haven't seen it, that's fabulous, and then one on the Deforest Action Project. But that's how we've done a lot of our work recently is with HP Catalyst Academy. And so if you go to tundraconnectionsacademy.com, you can actually go straight to our courses. You will still need to go back to the HP Catalyst Academy to register for them. But one is on polar bears in a changing climate, and that's the first course we did about 4 months ago. And then our newest one is Arctic Connections, Exploring Ecosystems Around the World. And I think it's really important. Not everybody lives in Canada, where we have some of our Canadians, with us today. Not everybody lives by the polar bears in Canada or Alaska. So sometimes they don't grab that connection as quickly to what's going on with climate change. But things are happening all over the world, whether you live in the United States, whether you live in Australia, in Asia. There are different things happening with the ecosystem in which everyone lives. And so making some of those connections, I think, is important to understand how this really is a problem for everyone, that the changes we've seen because of climate change there are problems for everyone, not just for the polar bears. So this is a great resource to go through and look at those courses and see if there's something of interest to you, not just on polar bears, but on other ecosystems as well. We have the Galapagos Islands, we have the Pantanals, we have Rocky Mountains, lots of different areas included in the one on the right. So moving on, one of the things I know that Gail and Lucy will remember from when we did some work in Europe a few years ago was talking about global education, and we worked on a lot of global education projects. We have some resources up in iTunes U. But we talked about change over time, and one of the really important ways to document change over time is through photo, imagery, or videos. And Daniel J. Cox is a professional photographer who's worked with Polar Bears International for several years now, longer than I have. I think I'm coming into my 7th year with them. And Daniel's been working with them much longer. He travels the world as a professional photographer. And his charge of PBI with Polar Bears International, besides being an advisor, is also to document the changes in the Arctic and other ecosystems through his photography. And so the one that he's created for the Arctic is called the Arctic Documentary Project. And there's a great video where he explains it that's on the HP Catalyst, our website for Arctic Connections. And you can watch that video where he talks about those connections and what he's doing with the Arctic Documentary Project. And I think this is so important for kids and for teachers, to the power of visual imagery and what we're doing with photography and what we can do with videos and documenting change over time in your school, in your community, in your part of the world. There are lots of ways to use visual imagery, and that really ties into the visual literacy that we need to be implementing and growing with our kids, with our students. So Dan's doing some really great work with the Arctic Documentary Project, and he's showcasing how he's seen changes in the Arctic over the years he's been out there. And along with that, we have the lesson, like I told you, about the Arctic Documentary Project that's on that HP Catalyst Academy Tundra Connections website that we've created. So there's a mini lesson there that talks about change over time and climate change and sea ice. and things like that. And with that Arctic documentary project, he's actually given us a library of photo imagery for several ecosystems that he's given rights to students and teachers to use. Just give them credit, and they're pretty much almost like Creative Commons. They're copyright free for educational purposes. So there are lots of different resources there as you're studying different ecosystems and wanting to kind of discuss the differences in the ecosystems. I love this little blue-footed booby picture from the Galapagos Islands that he took. I think that's really funny with their little blue feet. But the goals are just to gain an understanding of the African savanna, the Galapagos, the Pantanal, the Rocky Mountains, and the Arctic, and then to compare what's happening to all of those different ecosystems. So one of the things that we've done with our work with Google is I've really expanded my knowledge. I've been so lucky to work with this great team from Google who has been with us in Canada. And they do a lot with Google Maps and Google Earth, and they recently did a project in the Galapagos Islands with Google Street View. And you can actually just do a Google search, imagine that, for Galapagos Island Street View project with Google. And there's some amazing resources here, lots of images, lots of Street View and map correlations that you can use with them if you're studying something like this. In the Galapagos, this is something I learned, there are actually 4 different ecosystems just in the Galapagos Islands alone. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I think that's right. So that was a really interesting fact, but it's an amazing project what they've done there. And taking this imagery even a step farther, and how can we use satellite imagery and how can we use maps? Well, we know Google Earth has such power, is a powerful tool, and they've released some new tools for education recently. If you haven't seen them, they have some fabulous tools for education out there now with some of the map creation tools and digital storytelling that go together. But you can also access this historical imagery and see some of the changes that have taken place over time. The historical imagery has come into play in some countries such as, in areas of the world such as Borneo and the Brazilian Amazon and Tanzania, Sumatra, even the Appalachian Mountains. And I'll kind of show you some of that and how we're able to use those kinds of images and satellite imagery and maps and Google Earth and Google Maps to really see what's happening to the world with different types of environmental issues. So for Jane Goodall and Tanzania, where I've been lucky enough to actually travel and work several times, it's forest monitoring projects. One of the biggest problems in Tanzania for a long time was the deforestation, which would then push the chimpanzees out of their natural habitat. And so they would just come in and log all these areas of trees, and one tree would provide education for a person in Tanzania for one of their children for a year. So you have to try and figure out how to help the people who live there find other ways to sustain themselves rather than logging, because logging was just devastating the land. When I flew into Gombe, it was just amazing, the deforestation you could see from the air. And you can do the Google Earth flyover tour of Gombe and see it as well. And then they've done some other satellite tracking and mapping here showing the forest monitoring that they're doing. And then this chief here on the right, who is down in the Amazon, and the work they're doing because of the same type of deforestation. And then also Sumatra and the tigers and things that are being affected by those types of things there. So they're able to use the satellite imagery and see where the forests are being cut down. And they're actually, the ones in the Amazon, it's amazing. They've actually given some of the locals technology tools to monitor what they're seeing and to report it back. So they're really making a difference with this imagery and by finding ways to help stop some of the things that are happening. In Borneo, what's happening is they're cutting down palm trees for palm oil. And as they cut down the palm trees, the orangutans are losing their habitat. So deforestation, and this is Michael's Furtick's project that the person we were speaking about earlier, has used some of the satellite imagery and has a great education component for deforestation. And they're tied with, he's tied with Taking It Global. So you can check Taking It Global and deforestation and learn more about who can be a part of that satellite monitoring. And much of it is almost like citizen science too, but you can examine the satellite imagery and become involved in that project as well. So all these global issues, and we have problems happening with water supplies, with habitat, with endangered species, and with ecosystems. And, you know, the work I've done in Tanzania and the work I've done, and this is Sumi Secondary School at the foot of Kilimanjaro, and that's Kilimanjaro there in the picture. The work I've done there, and then the work I've done with Polar Bears International, we've just seen so many connections that are starting to kind of form that makes us realize this is a problem more than just in Tanzania and in Canada as well. So these different things, like in Mount Kilimanjaro in 1912, you can see the ice cap on the top. And 2006, you can see it, and there's been an 85% decrease in the size of the ice cap there. And what worries me a lot about that, all the villagers around Sumi Secondary School, where I'm actually a mama of the village, and I've worked at that school, that's their water supply. And when the ice goes, I don't know where they'll get their water. There's nowhere else around to get their water. So it's really a problem that's much bigger than just the polar bears. And then you can look at what happened in the Gulf a few years ago with the oil spill and all the damages to the habitat and ecosystem there. And so what is the connection between polar bears and a Gulf oil spill, you might be thinking? And I think helping our kids understand these connections is important, because it's things like fossil fuels. Where are we still using fossil fuels, and what would be an alternative energy source? How can we use clean energy? What is it done to the habitat? What's the habitat like there now versus how it was before in that ecosystem? What species are endangered there that may have been threatened by the oil spill, and what's the biodiversity there? So lots of ways to make connections from different places around the world. And what I love about this, it's that 21st century skill of using authentic learning and doing real science in the real world. And that's how we can really make things become alive for our kids, is not just the concepts and the conceptual and the abstract in the books, but to really be working with real authentic data and things that are happening out there in the real world. So here are some of the things we're seeing with climate that are happening around the world that kind of help with, make those connections we're seeing, and I'm sure you've noticed a lot of these. Water shortages in parts of the world, lots of drought, lots of areas in Africa that have been greatly affected. The changes in the sea ice we've talked about. The intensity of weather systems. I was reading something about what happened recently in the Philippines, and yes, they're used to having, not hurricanes, but typhoons go through there all the time, but this one was off the charts with intensity, and a lot of it could be attributed to climate change. The coral reefs, the bleaching of the coral reefs, the change in the ocean acidity, the ice melt on the glaciers and mountaintops, and then the rising sea levels. And, the predictions with rising sea levels, and you can look at some of the Google Earth kind of satellite layovers of that and see what they're predicting. So lots of connections and different types of ecosystems are taking place right now that are all connected back to climate change. So how do kids get involved in working with real, authentic scientific data? How do you get involved? I think it's fun. There are lots of great organizations out there doing what we call citizen science, and that is where you can be a scientist too, a citizen scientist. And what it means is you can be out in the field making observations in your neighborhood, in your community, in your part of the world. Additionally, you can be monitoring things like this one on the seafloor. You can help explore the ocean floor via that website. The Mars Education website that's by NASA, you can actually have your students examine some of the real Mars photography imagery and satellite imagery. And some students, 6th grade students, I think they were 6th grade, I might be wrong, I'd have to read really closely, but there were some students that you can read about who actually discovered a cave on Mars that scientists didn't know exists by using that imagery. So there's the Mars Education Project. Journey North is tracking the migration of animals and butterflies and birds, and also can help your students track, when bulbs bloom in the spring. So it's showing the patterns that we're seeing that change over time. That I know in the South here in Memphis, we're able to grow plants that we used to be not able to grow. Things like gardenias that would freeze in the winter. I have 2 in my backyard now. So we're seeing that gradual change. It's affecting it. lots of mobile apps for citizen science as well, including one for the Firefly Watch, and that was done in Boston, where I don't know about you, but in my yard in the summer, I don't see as many fireflies as I used to. So the Firefly Watch, you can actually count the fireflies in your neighborhood and tell them, you know, the GPS position will tell them where you are, and you document the time and date, and then they're collecting that real authentic data. So lots of these types of citizen scientists are really using the data so that they can go on and use it with their students, and they're participating in real research. And that was the conversation Denver Holt and some of us had, was all this great technology, but you still need observation. You still need to be out in the field. Looking back at Jane's work, you could definitely have had some kind of satellite tracking devices on the chimpanzees in Gombe, but you would have never seen them using the sticks to go into the termite mounds and being the first animal that she saw that really used something as a tool. So it's also the observations that are important. And since scientists can't be everywhere, now they have the ability to have citizens participate through technology in these citizen science projects. I know Dr. Don Moore, who works with the Smithsonian Zoo, has done a lot of work with the Smithsonian, and they have a lot of information about citizen science. And Polar Bears International is also doing citizen science. So lots of great ways even to use what we have for you to use with your students. And this is what they use in the field. NBC Nightly News, if you go to their website, they recently, it's Ann, and I'm trying to think of her last name. One of the reporters was in the Tundra in Churchill. And there are several clips there talking about the bears and climate change. And one of the things Dr. Tom Smith from Brigham Young University was holding up and talking about is this Polar Bear scorecard. And it's actually on the Tundra Connections Academy website that we do with HP, where you can download it and use it. And we have images from Dan Cox and BJ Kershaw that you can use with it and have your students score the health of polar bears in photos and determine their health. So if you look at this poor little bear on the bottom right and you look at the scorecard, I think it'd be pretty easy. What do you think he is? Type it in the chat. Is he a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? 1 being the skinniest and 5 being the very healthiest. So anybody want to put their guess in the chat window? A 2 could be a 2. There's a 2. Lots of 2s coming in. And it does look thin. I mean, look at its back, look at its neck, look at its shoulder blade sticking out. Yep. So that's what we actually have someone that's been in the field working with us, Cassandra, who's a graduate student, and Cassandra rides along in some of the tourist buggies, and she is able to take photos and track the position of the bears and then compare them and record data on a chart to keep track of the bears she's seeing each year and determine their health. And so she's doing that as a citizen science project as part of her graduate work. But this is here for your kids to use too, along with these graphs up here about the sea ice breakup and female body mass and the changes we've seen over the years from the female body mass. And here's real authentic data that you can use with your students if you want to do a unit on this. It's all here for you to use, but it's things that real scientific data that's authentic and things that are still being used in the field today. So how does this tie into global connection and global education? We've talked about taking it global and all the great work they're doing. They have lots of projects, ways to connect on projects, ways to connect with partners that you can sign up and find someone around the world to do something with. Same thing with Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots. They have a project center. Not that you have to do things globally to help the polar bears. I think there's lots of levels. You can do them locally in your community, regionally. You can do them from your home, and you can do them globally too. But as educators and trying to really work with global competencies and global communication and cultural understanding and all the things that everyone who's at this conference is trying to do, it's a great way to compare and contrast ecosystems, what's happening in your part of the world, what are you doing to make a difference. Maybe we can work together like kids work with kids, which is really, really powerful. So those are 2 great resources for that as far as making some of those global connections. Another one is challenge-based learning, and this is perfect. These topics are perfect for project-based learning or challenge-based learning. So we have resources on the challenge-based learning website, and challenge-based learning is the New Media Consortium has launched launched this in coordination with a lot of different organizations. Lucy's done some work with them for the Horizon Report. So I encourage you to look at that too, especially if you're involved in challenge-based learning. And there are a lot of challenge-based learning resources on iTunes U for your use as well, including one of the best ones is the teacher guide. I love the teacher guide there. So moving on. One of the things I did a couple years ago was I created a unit on polar bears. It's called Polar Bears and Changing Climate, and this is a great unit for teachers and educators who are interested in challenge-based learning using these polar bear resources. So it's all about polar bears and other resources, climate change, and ties it all into challenge-based learning and takes you through examples of what a lesson like that could be. So I encourage you to look at that. It's at tinyurl.com/CBL polar bears, because this is actually what the long site is, which is really long. So I don't think you really want to do the long one there. I pasted it in the chat, but it's a Google site, so it's a pretty long one. But, you know, actions do make a difference, and I think lots of times, oh, wrong link, sorry, Lucy, I must have copied it wrong. But I'll carry on and let your tinyurl maybe work. But, so your actions can make a difference. You know, kids will think, what can I do? What can one person do to change what's happening with the climate? But the truth is, as one individual, you may feel like you can't make a difference, but collectively we can. If we all work together and everyone does one thing to change what's happening in the world, we can all make a difference. And it's not too late for the polar bears, and it's not too late for the other ecosystems and animals. So what can you do to help? And we've just listed some things. I'm sure that if you wanted to, you could put some things in the chat now. It'd be great to see some of the things that you're doing. What are some of the things you're doing to help with climate change, or being ecologically responsible, or being good environmental citizens? So would you type something in the chat, some of the things you're doing? I'd love to see some of the initiatives that you're doing. I mean, easy things like recycling, turning off the lights and electronics. No idle zones at school. There's a school that won an award through the Polar Bears International Project, and they won an award for just setting up a no idle zone. So when parents are waiting in carpool, they turn their car off, and that's just helping cut down on the CO2. Reusable bags. Kimmy's recycling. Anybody else have something they want to add in there in the chat window? Public transit, perfect. Local groceries, that's become really popular, buying local. Local groceries is really important because you're saving on the transportation and all the CO2 from harvesting and having to transport it. So that's great. Reduce your footprint and stop eating beef, and that's a good one, even if it's just one day a week. Pick one day a week where you're not going to eat beef, because that ties into some of the gases that are going on, the methane and everything that's damaging the atmosphere as well. Shop with Goodwill, right. Thrift stores are really popular. So use environmental things like the inside cores of TP, toilet paper, other things to make environmental. Our projects have environmental projects have been, discarded. Use them for our projects. I know now you can even get carpets that are made out of plastic bottles, and you would never know it. So just lots of ways to reuse and recycle. Use one of these kinds of water bottles, not the disposable kind. Be a conservationist and share it. Try and talk someone else that you know into doing the same thing. And I love, don't purchase overpackaged products. We have a week during Earth Day, the week of Earth Day at school, where everything in the cafeteria can't be prepackaged. It all has to be, fresh from the cooks in the kitchen or something, but not prepackaged. So just everyone making a difference, and some of the ones that make a difference the most are the kindergartners, because they're going to remind mom and dad all the time to do something. So if we all collectively do one more thing and one more thing, it really can make a difference. And then at the highest level, businesses and influencing congressmen to change the laws, of course, business to business, all those kinds of things are important, and changing policies, that's important as well. So taking action, and there are lots of ways to take action, either in your home, doing something different in your home, an energy audit or something, in your community, in your school, or globally. And let the kids come up with ideas. That's part of the challenge-based learning and project-based learning. Let them brainstorm what they think could be changed. And let it be student-designed. And use technology to publish it to a great global audience. Taking action is important, and let them publish and share. We've had great public service announcements our kids have made with iMovie and different video programs. We've had amazing brochures they've created with pages. I mean, there's just lots of great things they can do. Websites they've done in Google Sites. Lots of things they can do in their own community and then share it with a global audience. The Challenge 2020 program is a great one as well. So one of the things that has always stayed with me with Dr. Jane and the work that she's done is that knowledge leads to compassion or understanding, which leads to action. And I think that's an important part. That's what I teach the kids with public service announcements, and I think you'll see that in a lot of things that happen. The more you know, the better your knowledge is about a problem, the more you understand it and gain compassion. And then the compassion part is what will inspire you to take action to make a difference. And letting our kids know they can make a difference. Absolutely. I've seen it over and over with the work our kids have done. That it may be little, but that they can make a difference. So teaching the kids about the problems, letting them learn and come up with solutions, and they'll understand it. They really will take a lead on making a difference and that they can make a difference. So some of the resources that I just recommend for you, and you can certainly see them through Lucy's very great list of links. Thank you so much, Lucy, is Polar Bears International, the Tundra Connections Academy, the HP Catalyst Academy, Taking It Global, Roots and Shoots, Discovery Education, and the Challenge-Based Learning website. So there are lots of resources out there. I've really collected a lot of these on the Tundra Connections Academy website. If you just go to Tundra Connections Academy and look at the two programs, the two different mini courses, and go to the resource pages, a lot of them are out there already for you, so you can grab those resources there. You can also email me, because here's my email address, julene@mac.com, and that's been a Nookshuk right there on the shore of the Hudson Bay. And so that's kind of the end of, I'm laughing at the chat right now, Lucy. That's kind of the end of the presentation, that it's not the end of our work, as we all work with our kids and all work to do one thing, to make a difference for the polar bears and for the world pretty much. So that's it, Tundra Connections and polarbearsinternational.org. And
well,
so any other questions?
If everybody wants to type their questions in the chat, or if they have resources to share that are related, please put them in the chat. I'm wondering, Julene, so you said that for a month every year, the Tundra Buggies are up there and broadcasting for Tundra Connections. How can teachers connect with you to do that, to participate in that program? How can they pull in? It's all through Polar Bears International's website, the Tundra Connections program, and they'll see it on the Polar Bears International website. The live broadcast just finished, but all the archive broadcasts are there. And we do often have some broadcasts through the HP Catalyst Academy, where we'll actually connect with people directly. And if they're interested in having one of us, or having us do a special broadcast, we have several throughout the year, and they can watch that. They can watch the Polar Bears International website for announcements about webcasts, or they can email me at this email address, julene@mac.com. And I'll see what I can do. I already have one school that I've offered to do one with. So if it's not a scientist, you may get me. But we all have lots of experience, and we love to connect with kids. We actually got to teach the kids at the high school and the elementary school this year in Churchill, which was a first, and that was really fun. We had a community map up. We did lots of great things this year. So what are some supplementary things that people could do with your broadcasts, either asynchronously or synchronously? Have you seen any schools do anything creative around their study of polar bears, out of curiosity? I don't know with the broadcast so much. There are lots of video clips and things that they can use that are in the resources on the Polar Bears International website, or their YouTube channel. Has lots of different things. The archive broadcasts you could use. I mean, they're excellent ones, and some of the topics are fabulous. So I would just suggest you go to the archive list on YouTube for Tundra Connections webcasts. And if you have trouble, just email me. I'll send you the link, and see if there's some around topics. There's some on sea ice. There's some for young children. There's some
some for adults more, and there's some for general audiences. So a lot of different ones. And then there are just great resources on a lot of the HB Calist Academy. Those courses, we've really pulled together some great resources there for education. I highly recommend those. And then just the education section of PBI.
And I know there's something that you can't talk about, but do you want to say anything about what you can't talk about?
Yeah, I'll say what I can't talk about in a second. The other thing I was going to tell you on the resources for the Arctic, the ecosystems, the Arctic Connections Exploring Ecosystems Around the World as part of the HB Academy. We actually encourage you to make little short videos and use photos and give lots of Web 2.0 tools on how to use the photo imagery we have there. And so lots of ideas on how to integrate technology and all of that as well. So I guess the secret announcement that I can say a little bit is just that the Google team that was with us is from Street View and Maps and Google Earth. And you saw the Street View camera. It was fun to wear one of them. I actually participated in a lot of Street View work while I was there, but not on my back. I just put it on for fun. The trucker was on my back for fun, for a photo op. But the ones that I used were actually installed in vehicles, and we drive around. But the trucker we took to the school, and the kids loved it. It weighs about 40 pounds. It has 15 cameras in it that are shooting in all different directions, and it takes like a pano and stitches them together. So that was really interesting to see how they do that. And it's 2 hard drives for the geeks out there, 2 hard drives and a battery, 2 batteries and a hard drive, sorry, 2 batteries and a hard drive, and the batteries are hot swappable. And then it's also made to withstand cold and weather and everything else. It actually has a cylinder of, you know, the granules you get in your purse when you buy a new piece of luggage or purse or clothes, or kind of that silica stuff to absorb moisture. They have a tube of that to keep the cameras from steaming up that keep feeding into there. And yeah, I don't know. You can ask the question. I'll just say if I can or can't answer it, that's fine. There's a question that would ask.
So regarding the Google stuff, guys, just keep your eyes and ears open. It's pretty exciting. So
yeah, it's not really silica gel. It's like silica gel, but it's little granules, and it had a different name to it. It may be the same, but it has a different name as well. But it was really fun to work with the camera, and just a great crew that works all over the world. They were in Galapagos Islands. They've been all over the world doing different things. And so it's always interesting. Churchill is just a few hundred people, but during polar bear season there are thousands who come from all over the world, and a lot of filmmakers. We've done the IMAX film has been created out there with the Arctic IMAX film that was done about 1.5 years ago. So I've worked with the film company that does a lot of those around the world. And we've met amazing people, a lot of celebrities that have come through the doors all the time, and so it's always great. And I really do love some of the pieces they did on the NBC Nightly News. There's some great short clips there too. But just a great team, and I've been very fortunate because there are so many scientists I have met, and I have learned so much more than when I started this journey, and experts from all over the world. So it's been really an exciting opportunity. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
A question for you, but I'm gonna ask him to email you because I want to make sure everybody it has enough time to get to the next set of sessions.
Yeah, that's great.
Gideon, Nora, please email Julene. Julene has her address right there, julena@map.com, and I'm sure she'll be happy to respond to you. Because I think watch Google mid-December. There'll be an announcement probably mid-December with a lot of new stuff. Can you hear me? Okay, I wasn't sure if you can hear me. I just was saying that Gideon should email you about his question, which is not Google related, but is rather in-depth. So he will follow up with that. Julene, thank you so much for sharing your work. We're really excited about this, and I hope that many of you will participate in their events going forward, whether with the Catalyst program or the live broadcast next fall. But there's tons of stuff there that I'm sure you can dig into, and Julene is very accessible on Twitter and email and that sort of thing, so please feel free to contact her if you have any future needs for resources. Thanks for coming, everyone, and see you at the next set of sessions. Bye-bye.